Hello, welcome everybody. I'm Riley Smith, obviously, the picture. We've been doing this 10 years now, so I want to thank you guys for coming out in the rain. You are the real diehards, right? Tough coconut grovers. And so I'm hoping that today we'll be able to teach you a little bit about the market, where we are, where we're going. We're going to cover the townhouse market, condo market, single family market, ask a lot of questions. You know, I always say the more you drink, the better this will go. And the more questions you ask, the better this will go. If I have to sit here and just talk for 45 minutes, it's going to be terrible. So please, please, please interject questions at any time. A couple of housekeeping. We are recording this, so if any of you don't want to be recorded, now is your time to go. We're also on Instagram and Facebook. We will have a recording. If you want to pass it on to anybody after the show, let us know, and we'll send it to you, or we'll send you an extra packet. We've had some people in the room have been coming here. One of our patrons has been coming for 10 years, I believe. And she said, you know, when she started coming, I was skinny. So this is what real estate will do to you. So if you have questions, please just raise your hand, shout them out. Repeat them just so the people watching online can hear. But I'm hoping that we will really dive into the numbers. So those of you who don't know me, I'm a Coconut Grove native, born and raised here, Coconut Grove Elementary graduate, and been living in the Grove ever since returning from college. Been selling real estate here in Miami for 20 years. A bunch of my teammates are here. Big shout out to my wife who really helped put this on, the marketing team. And of course, Silvano, the owner of Greenstreet, for letting us have his event here. So now that we have the housekeeping underway, a little bit about the numbers. So I am a numbers data person. We track all of our own numbers. These numbers don't come from the MLS. The Grove, those of you who live here know, is a very interesting and funky kind of a neighborhood. It also, 33133, goes to the other side of US 1. So the numbers online can be skewed a little bit. So for the last 10 years, we've tracked all of our own numbers. So maybe a little bit different than you see in other places. And I've been doing this 10 years, and I have never seen what we're going to talk about today. The change in the Grove, as all of you, I'm sure, have seen with the construction, the building, all the New Yorkers and all the new people coming to town has really changed our market. And the numbers are just really mind-blowing. So without further ado, what you all came here for, let's talk about the Grove. All right, so we're going to start with the single family. The single family market in the Grove is about 3,000 homes at any given time. Right now, you can see this is the current state of our inventory. So 84 homes, 10 under contract. This number is absolutely insane. You know, when I started 20 years ago, the average sale was about 700,000. So the median number, we only have 88, and it's a little skewed. It's a little top heavy right now. So the median number is about 3.3. Just to give you an idea where the middle of the market is right now. And then the average asking price is, obviously you can see $1,400. So that, as you can see here, when we look at the history, has really changed. So this is my favorite chart of the whole day, these two charts I'm going to show you now. So this was, I just wanted to use a year that was pre-COVID, a normal real estate year, just so we can have a perspective as to what happened. And we'll get into what happened in the last 2 years as we go along. But you can see here, obviously, back in the day, there was quite a size of our homes that were under $1 million. And then, obviously, the major part of our market was the 2 million. And we had a few that were now in the 3+. Now we fast forward 6 years, and the yellow is gone. So the days of $1 million home in Coconut Grove that's not torn down is probably over. And obviously, you can see that our market has totally shifted to what is now 58% over 3 million. And we'll get into the luxury a little bit later, but that chart just is an incredible evolution of our market in 6 years. Any questions, thoughts, anybody? So those of you who owned a house for 6 years, this is just single family right now. Yep, we'll do condos and townhouses as we go along. And Riley, yes? You said there was total inventory of about 3,000 homes? There's about 3,000 homes, 330, 200, give and take, yes. No, homes that are in Coconut Grove, yes. Yeah, I mean, but I'm just wondering if you have the quantities from 2018 to... I mean, it hasn't changed that much because they knock one down and put another one in the same place. They really haven't built too many new homes on lots. Maybe it's changed a little, but give or take, very close. Still the same. So the condo inventory has changed a lot, obviously, over the years. All right, so let's look at what has happened so far this year. This year has been a remarkable year. So we have 102 sales. I'll show you how that looks historically in a minute as we go along a little more. Our average price here is, the average price is 3.3. But to give you a perspective, again, I like to look at the median. So the one right in the middle, number 51, is about 2.3. So again, we've had a lot of luxury sales in the Grove that have raised those average prices. So, and we'll touch on the luxury part in a little while. Days on the market, 43, but we'll see that number is slowly growing. Again, this is all closed data, and up to now, we're still seeing only 3% off asking price. That's taking into consideration January, February, March, where we had bidding wars, and some of them were going 5% over asking price. So we're still pretty steady. To give you a perspective on this, a healthy market for us has been generally about 10% off ask, so 90% of value. Any questions? Anybody? Can you guys still hear me in the back okay? Yep, great. Okay. So here we get to see the history of the sales in the Grove. Obviously, 2021 was quite a year. Been bouncing along a long time, making our way up here. And then this year, we really are seeing, we're probably going to be the lowest we've had going all the way back to 2016. We have 10 pending. We'll probably find about 10 more. So what's happened is 2021, we all know, was a crazy year. After COVID, everybody discovered our little town, Coconut Grove, and it had just taken off. And this number represents probably anybody that thought they were going to sell, wanted to sell, might sell, probably got knocked on the door by a realtor like me saying, hey, I have a big bag of money. Would you like to move sometime soon? So we saw people who probably weren't even ready to sell, but took advantage of the numbers that they were getting. And so that number, I think here, is why our number is so low here. Also, we'll get into a little bit more later on why it's a little more challenging selling your house now with interest rates and other things like that. So, but this is going to be a historic low year after a historic high year. Any questions for anybody? Anybody thoughts on that? Any of you one of these people in the room today? Anybody bought a home last year? One? All right. So here we can see where we start to look at what the price per square foot is, and we're going to break down this number a little bit more in another slide. But obviously you can see historically, we're just bumping along, slowly making our way up after the 2006-07 crash. We start to recover in 9, and we're working our way along here. And then all of a sudden, COVID comes. Everybody discovers it. So if you bought your house 10 years ago, you're looking at a 200% increase. And just 2 years ago, you're looking at an 89% increase. So we basically had 10 years of appreciation, we were talking, Jack, in the last 2 years for most single-family homeowners. And this number is surprising because a lot of people probably thought, well, this year we're already sort of over the hump and we're sort of working our way down. I do expect probably to come down a little bit as the market has slowed a little, and we'll talk about that going forward. Any questions? Any thoughts? Yes, please. No, I would be guessing to say 3/4 probably were, maybe even higher than 3/4 were written offers as cash. But most of my clients and a lot of my colleagues' clients, most of them put some debt on it after they, this was back, remember, this is the bidding world, right? You're begging people to take your money, right? And so back then everybody was writing cash offers, but most of them were putting some kind of debt on the house from what I saw. Yes? Yeah, so the first slide was $1,400. That's the current asking price per foot. This is what has sold per foot so far this year. So this is, this is a more realistic. The $1,400 is probably stretching it right now, which is, I'm going to talk about that dynamic in the market in a little while. But yeah, so this is the average asking price per foot of a single family home so far this year, which this was a major jump. This is just incredible. I mean, obviously we've never seen anything like that.
You just said asking price. That's the actual price.
Sale price. Sorry. Yes. Thank you. JC, can I get some water? Thank you, sir. If anybody needs a drink, just raise your hand. JC's the best. All right. So this will show us the progression of where we are, sort of the sales price. Bear in mind, again, it's a little skewed because we've had a lot of major luxury sales this year. The median is 2.3, so it's the middle home right now is 2.3, but, oh, JC, thank you. Anybody questions, thoughts? Hopefully you should all, if you're all homeowners, you should all be smiling. And that's true. All right, so This is sort of showing us, I think there's a perception out there that pricing has already started to go down and what's happened to pricing since what we call the surge, which was last year. But realistically, if you look what's happened this year, our prices have held steady. July being the outlier, there was a couple of gated community and waterfront homes that sold disproportionately in the price per square foot. But still, I think the perception was that pricing was going down as we were hearing all the negativity. But really, you can see that it's really held its ground. There's we're reaching a sort of a battleground right now between sellers and buyers, right? As you saw earlier, the sellers are at $1,400 a foot. The buyers are at a little under $1,000 a foot. It's going to sort of be, who's going to move in what direction. But what we're seeing in the market right now, and it is a little bit slow in terms of number of deals being written, is, obviously buyers and sellers are probably not watching the same news headlines, right? So most buyers would say that anyway of their sellers. So obviously we don't know these numbers yet, but this is just shocking because remember, generally these numbers are 2 to 3 months behind when they go into contract. So I'm guessing this number will probably start to come back down because August, September, we really started to feel a slowdown in the market. Yes, sir.
Where do you see this going in the next, at least for the first 6 months?
I don't think there's going to be a lot of transactions, I'm guessing. Just interest rates, uncertainty in the world, stock market, everything that's going on, recession. Also, I think it's going to be a little while before the sellers start to capitulate a little bit and get a little bit more realistic. Most sellers are still thinking they're going to get what their neighbor got in December and January, and it's hard to wrap your head around how fast things have slowed down. So I don't think we'll have a lot of transactions. Also in Miami, generally we hit Thanksgiving and we all take the rest of the year off. So especially the realtors. So I don't know that there'll be a ton of transactions to help us now. I think probably really our season, we hope will pick up in mid-January, February. But then again, I'm going to have my mortgage guy, Ed, who's somewhere in the room here, talk to us about mortgage rates later. But, we may get another rate hike, and that's not going to help probably. So, yes.
Let's say overmarket. Are those people who bought here to stay, is there any data around it, or did they buy as investment, or are they here to stay?
So the question was the people who bought at the peak of the market, did they buy as investment or did they buy here to stay? From my experience, most of them were buying to stay, or at least to spend 6 months in a day here, right, for the taxes, right? Which is a big part of who our market is. I don't think investment was, I think the investors seem to have gotten in earlier than that, the people at the peak. But if you go back to the slide here, it almost doesn't really matter when you buy real estate in Coconut Grove, right? It seems to be trending up pretty much always. I think there'll be a little correction, but I'm going to get into why I don't think we're really headed for a big downfall towards the end of the talk. Anybody else? Questions? All right, back to where we were here. So, all right, so here is now looking at what has happened and how it is the proportion of our properties here in Coconut Grove. So again, going back a few years, 30% under $1 million, 43 is the bulk of our inventory. And then we had a 10%, which we considered back then luxury at $3 million. I would say luxury probably has jumped up to $5 or $6 million now, if we look at the numbers. But then when you look at this, you can see what's changed completely, right? So plus $3 million has started to dominate our market. And I don't think we'll ever see any yellow on here and again. So pretty crazy chart. Right? All right. Anybody have thoughts, questions on that? Oh, can you still hear me okay in the back? Lars, you're good? All right. Yes, please.
Sorry.
No worry.
Do you think that homes that are sold for land value would show up in the yellow?
So I have a whole section on land. So we pull out land value sales. So the question was, would land value show up here? So yeah, there are going to still maybe be some lots under $1 million. But we pull them out separately, so we'll touch on land in a few minutes. Anybody else before we go on? All right, and so this chart I'd like to see just to show sort of, everybody asked me sort of when is the best time to buy, when is the best time to sell. So we went back and took the last 10 years, month by month, and it's not surprising that June has the most closings. Our busiest time of year generally is March and February, in this area here. And then you would see a closing 60 days later. And then it's not surprising that November is our lowest because nobody wants to be in Miami in August and September, right? So our numbers generally go down. COVID changed that for a year and a half, 2 years. But this year we saw that cycle come back where we really pumped the brakes in the summertime. And, so I think we're all hoping, certainly the realtors in the room are hoping that things pick up a little here in the next few months. But it's just interesting. And then we always have a spike in December, as there's a certain group that want to be here in December for tax purposes for the following year. Anybody have any questions or thoughts? No? Okay. All right. So this is what's an interesting chart. As our market has evolved, the luxury market has really, you can see the breakdown in each market in terms of where the current sale price per foot lies. So most of the market is in the 800 range, but then it's skewed by the 3 million plus market. This represents gated communities, new construction, waterfront homes. Those are generally selling at a significant, advantage over the regular homes in the Grove. All right. Questions? Okay. All right. And so this chart is kind of, to your point, JR, where we are in the market right now. And this chart, I think, shows why we're seeing a slowdown in the market. You have your current asking price, right? $1,400 a foot. This number represents the price that houses were at when they went under contract this year. And then this represents what they closed for. So there's a huge gap between what we're asking and what is closed, almost 30%. But once you get to the right price, you're only seeing a 3% decrease in your final sale price. But I think until this number comes much more down, before we're going to see these numbers go up. My guess is sellers are going to have to participate in helping buyers, get homes. And I think, the days on the market have significantly risen. We're at 125 days on the market for our current active houses right now. A year ago, we were at 10 days, 12 days, 15 days. So it's significantly risen. And I think that pressure will slowly come on the sellers. They'll probably capitulate a little bit. And I'm hoping in January, February, we'll get, some more transactions. Anybody? Questions? Yes, sir.
2 questions.
Yep.
One on the list price or the listing price.
Yep.
Currently, how do Coconut Grove compare to other markets within Dade County? And then number 2, in the last 30 to 60 days, are there retrades going on at the price level that's going to continue to lower the average price per square foot?
So 2-part question. One is, how does this number compare to the rest of Miami? I have a slide that'll show you the closed sales, but this number puts us right on par with Miami Beach and Key Biscayne, which are the 2 leading markets in our area. We're within $100 a foot of them. The second part of the question was, tell me again.
Retrades. Anything going on now in the last 30 to 60 days in terms of
in other words,
back and renegotiating?
Yeah, asking. So what's happening in the last 30 to 60 days is we're seeing a much more negotiation on inspections and things like that. I was just talking to Ed, my mortgage guy. We're also seeing a lot more contracts fall out. He was just saying, I don't think we've ever seen so many contracts fall out. So in 6 months, it totally changed, right? 6 months, buyers were on their knees begging, please let me buy your house. No inspection, no nothing. You live here as long as you want. All of a sudden now the buyers are, if the house is not perfect, I don't want it. And it's almost like if the seller takes your price, you're worried that you're paying too much today. So it has really, really trained. You really lost a lot. We're seeing contracts fall out at a higher rate than we have in a very long time. So, yes.
Are people walking from deposit?
Yes, if they're walking from deposit, not that I've seen. Most of them are getting 15-day inspections again, so they have a little more time to think about it. So I haven't really seen this. I only know of one guy for personal reasons, but so I haven't seen people walking away after they've gone under contract. But if the stock market keeps crashing, we will see more of that. Anybody else before we move on? We're almost done with single family and we'll get into the townhouses. Yes.
What's a single family vacancy rate?
Question was single family vacancy rate. I think low, but I don't have a metrics. I don't, unless they're waiting to get knocked down. And even some of those are being lived in right now. Probably shouldn't even be lived in. But I think probably very close to zero. I mean, there's a lot of out-of-town absentee owners that are not renting their homes when they're not here, certainly in the summer. But, like just full-on vacancy, probably less than 1%, I would bet you. All right. So here we go. So where are we headed and sort of what has happened lately? So this is a little confusing. I'll try to walk you through the chart. So the top one is mortgage rates. Obviously, mortgage rates the last few years down, 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 down. And then we hit a low right here in 2021. And then we have home prices taking off and then mortgage rates spiking. And the correlation is sort of, it's interesting to see that now we're starting to head down from those peak days, right? So as soon as rates started ticking up, prices slowly started coming down, but at not the speed that rates have gone up have we seen the decrease, right? I expect, looking at these charts, that this number is going to continue down for a while as price pressure comes on. I think mortgage rates will probably continue to go up, and I think finally sale prices will start to come down as well. It's going to be, once the Fed starts to lower, everybody believes the market, they're starting to tell the market they're going to continue to lower. And as soon as they do, we generally see a spike. So as this comes down, I think the number of sales will come back up. But in the meantime, I think the gap that we talked about between asking price and sale price is probably going to keep pressure on number of deals right now. Anybody have any thoughts on this question? Ed, am I right about that? When the rates change one time down?
Well, I would say that right now.
Sorry, those of you want to stand up? Perfect time to come. So Ed Wilburn with Femby Mortgage. He's one of our partners and has been doing this longer than I have. You want to just come up and talk a little? I think it's a good time to talk about interest rates and what pressure they're going to put on the market. I'm sure a lot of people want to know that.
You think they're going to put pressure on the market, Riley?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, guess so. I would probably tell you that, first of all, the mortgage market's a futures market. So what you know and I know and what we're all talking about, the Fed's going to raise rates. So they've announced that they've been very good at communicating what they're going to do in the future. So therefore, what's happened to the mortgage market was that we already started going up way before a lot of people started reacting to it. In fact, we had a lot of phone calls with clients when they would call and we would say, oh, no, the rates are 6%. They would say, really? Because they didn't realize already the market, as far as the mortgage-backed securities market, is already priced in a lot of the increases that are already forecasted to happen. So believe it or not, the last time the rates went up last week by the Fed, our rates actually declined because there was a change in their positioning for the future market. Their statement along the lines of, maybe we're going to be more cautious in the future. We don't want to ruin the economy completely. So maybe in the future we're going to take a little bit more consideration on data. So a lot of things now are data dependent. So we'll see how it goes. But we figure that the market's going to probably plateau. I talked to Riley over the summer. We were talking about what's going to happen when this all comes. And I think what we think is, because of the demand in the market now, for living in Coconut Grove and other markets, especially in Miami, we're going to see things plateau out. And we were talking earlier about, we are seeing a lot more cancellations of contracts. But as far as the demand, when a house comes in that is competitively priced, we're still seeing multiple offers. Yeah. So it's a matter of, are you positioned properly and you have the right price and do you have the right strategy to acquire the property?
There you go.
But as far as interest rates go, I think.
And then what happens once they start to tick down?
Well, for us, I don't think it's going to happen in the very near future. So we're getting a lot of people ask me, okay, well, I'll just get this loan today and then I'll refinance next year when the rates go down. And I'm like, well, it's probably not going to be next year. However, a lot of adjustable, what are called fixed term adjustables, are back in vogue now. So right now, a 30-year fixed on a conforming loan is around 7%. That's the market rate. Now, the good news is, if you're buying a Coconut Grove, you're probably having a non-conforming loan, getting a non-conforming loan or a jumbo loan. Believe it or not, the rates on those are much better. Rates around 6.5 on a 30-year fixed. You can do a 10-1 ARM at around 6%. And that's with no points, no origination fees. So still, that's a pretty good rate if you look in the past 10 years. You can get in the 5s on a 7-1. So if you wanted to position yourself to refinance in the future, get a 7-year or a 10-year ARM, you could still be in the, around the 6% mark. So, rates aren't really that bad when you look at it in that context. Yes. So still, it's a lot higher than 3%. Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that are holding up the market a bit, is that you've got a lot of sellers sitting there with 3% rates on their mortgages, and why they want to sell, where they want to go. So we'll see.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. So to give you perspective, I found my parents' mortgage when they bought their house way back when they refinanced. At one point in time, they had a 16% mortgage. So 6 doesn't look all that bad, right? It's all relative. Compared to 3, it looks terrible. I had a 6-point mortgage when I bought my house 15 years ago. But yes, I think for us realtors in the room, the Fed Reserve is sending us on a vacation. All right, here we go. So here's, to answer your question, Peter, here is the comparison of Coconut Grove to the rest of Miami and sort of where we see our pricing, right? So we follow just behind Key Biscayne and Miami Beach. Those two, I think, Key Biscayne especially is such a small space and so much proportion on the water compared to us that those prices are higher than ours. Same with Miami Beach. We've seen, you've all read the record sales and big numbers that are happening out there. So I think the waterfront and the amount of waterfront that we see on those two places is why they're higher than us. And then I think the rest of the progression kind of makes sense. And this number here in Miami-Dade is still really high. I mean, when we did our real estate talk a couple of years ago, it was like under 3, so 300 a foot. So anybody have any questions? So this is single family. We're going to move on here now to, I think, townhouses. Oh, no, land, sorry. So Jared, ask your question here. So land is always, again, only 3,000-ish pieces of land in Coconut Grove. Historically, we've only had 20 to 30 sales. Most of the time, they were in the past have probably been more developers than end users. But all of a sudden, everybody from out of town came. All the inventory was gone. Remember, we went from having probably 180 homes to down at one point to having 25 on the market. So a lot of people couldn't find what they wanted, so they decided they wanted to build. So we saw a big spike from there. Also, I think there were a lot of developers who were very bullish on the market, as we saw in the last year, that bought property then, hoping that that trend would at least level out or continue on. So I think we had more developers and more end users get into the land sales. And of course, you're going to see in the next slide that that number, then obviously supply and demand has really spiked the value of land. So obviously, land has almost doubled more than doubled in 2 years. And this number is not everybody who has a 7,000 square foot lot can calculate this accurately. Land is really, really tricky to value. It matters on what street, how big your lot is, how many trees are on your lot, different setbacks. So there's a lot of factors, whether they're in a gated community, whether they're in the water. So there's a lot of factors that go into valuing land. And if you have any questions on that later, I'm happy to sit down with you. But it's really almost a house by house basis, depending on a lot of factors, especially here in Coconut Grove. We all treasure our oak trees. I know Ivan's got a property with about 100 oak trees on it, which is quite challenging to build on. So any questions on land for anybody? JR, your land purchase was pretty good. All right. So we're going to shift. Before we shift, any more questions on single family before we go to townhouses? So we'll do townhouses now, then we'll get into condos, and then we'll wrap it up and have a little Q&A. So we just changed this chart before. So we used to sort of say there was Center Grove, which was behind Cocoa Walk between 27th Avenue and 32nd Avenue. And then there was the emerging market of West Grove, where we were seeing a lot of development. The numbers have pretty much come together. You really can't tell the difference in pricing. So now we consider Center Grove, which is generally our townhouse market. There are some single family, but the majority are townhouses. 27th Avenue, US 1, all the way over to Douglas, and down to Grand Avenue. So we've seen quite an explosion in this market. So here's the current inventory. So we only have 20, which is probably more than 50% less than we normally have. 7 under contract. The average list price is 1.75. I sold 2 townhouses in West Grove 20 years ago for $350,000 each and thought I was doing really well. So that was a bad idea. And you can see where the average list price is now at $700 something a foot. So trailing a little bit behind single family homes, right? Of course, because single family homes, you have the yard priced into it. So you actually have a little bit more dirt than the townhouses. So this is what has happened so far this year. We've had 78, which is a healthy number. The average, again, so here's where we're seeing the disparity in our markets, right? The average is only 1,100,000 of the closed sales, and the average ask is 1,000,007, right? So there's still a big gap between buyers and sellers right now, even in the townhouse market. 32 days on the market. The most interesting stat is that we're still seeing, if you average it all out over just about whatever asking price you got so far this year, I think that trend will not continue as we're seeing days on the market go longer, and all of that has happened in the last few years. This was pretty representative of what happened the first 6 months of the year, but we've really seen a big slowdown. I'm sure we're going to do another real estate talk sometime in January, February. When we redo our numbers for the end of the year, I think you'll see a different number here. So if you're trying to buy a townhouse, I think you can get a little bit off. Any questions on townhouses? Anybody? Does everybody know where we're talking about in the area and everything, the product? Yes, sir. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, what we're talking about here are the side-by-side 2 units that you see. There are some smaller ones and quadplexes, but we're just talking, we have one piece of land with 2 units on it. Yeah. And they're ranging in size, right? The new ones are bigger than the old ones.
But if it's a townhouse, it's got, let's say, a total of 12 units.
Yep.
Four in each building, 3 buildings.
Yep.
Each with their own private yard, 2-story townhouse.
Yes.
Structure of townhouse.
Yep.
Is that
Yes. That's what we're talking about. Yep, exactly. And they're structured as a condominium complex,
right?
right? But we put them as townhouses. The condos were more up and down Bayshore. Yes, sir.
So for the smaller towns,
Yep.
so that the common or big square,
Yep.
2 and 4, do you see any developers trying to buy those, take them down for the single family?
We haven't yet seen like that old Mediterranean smaller style get knocked down. I don't know of any yet. And I think just because with our market and the supply and demand so little, people were buying those at regular rates. Obviously, everybody wants to build the new, more modern white boxes that we call them, but I have seen those people only buying the old duplexes that really existed here. What made this market really was the zoning is really what made this market here, right? So most of Coconut Grove, you can't build 2 properties on one piece of land, right? But the zoning here prominently has been zone duplex forever. And used to have those low-level, one-rise, 1-story duplexes. All those pretty much have been bought up over time. And some people had single-family homes, especially in the West Grove, on those duplex lots. But the duplex lots what really added the value and changed this whole community here. Yes, Victor?
No, you just answered it.
All right. So, yes, so I have not seen those old Mediterraneans that were, really popular. I have not seen those come down and new ones come up yet. But sooner or later that'll happen, but it's going to, supply and demand will have to change before that will happen. Anybody else? Questions? No, we're good. All right, moving along. So we saw this, or here. All right, here, so we can see again, we have our second highest year last year. A lot of the reason this number is not higher is just literally supply and demand. They just ran out of townhouses. We sold them all. It's a much smaller space than the single family market. There's about 1,500 of these kind of townhouses. So 50% of what we have in the single family market. So that number actually is probably proportionally a little higher if you look at that. And this year, we certainly won't catch up to last year's numbers. And again, it's a combination of supply and demand. We just don't have enough townhouses, but it's also, again, combination of sellers and buyers no longer seeing eye to eye on price. Yes, sir?
The previous slide, I'm sorry.
No, don't worry.
I did a little calculation. It's $603 a foot.
Yes.
To get to $1.1 million, that's got to be a pretty big townhouse. My sense is that most of the townhouses I've seen all built are fairly small.
Well, the new ones are disproportionately much bigger. Because
square feet of, oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you're probably looking at the older ones could have ranged 14 to 18 to even 2,000. The new ones, the white boxes are easier to build, bigger square footage spaces. So you're looking at much bigger numbers now than we had before in terms of the actual living area. Yeah. Yes, sir.
On the slide that you just showed with the sales, do you know how many of those are like new online, like new construction versus?
No, I didn't. That number I didn't pull out. So, but certainly in your neighborhood, that's pretty much all of them are being sold. Certainly west of 32nd, everything being sold is new within the last 3 years. In the center, we still had some of the old Mediterraneans trading in there. So, yes, sir.
12 to 13, was that a post-recession building
Yes,
spike?
exactly. Yep, that's exactly what happened. Yep. Here, what happened was, in this market particularly, the foreclosure and short sale market killed people here. Everybody was upside down. So a lot of developers came in and bought a lot of those really low at that time, and then you started seeing the building coming. So the supply went through the roof. Yep. All right, so here's the progression of prices. Obviously pre-COVID, we were bouncing along, doing fine. COVID comes, supply and demand changes, everything we kind of talked to. Kind of the same roadmap that we have for the single family homes. I still just can't believe that we're there. Again, that's about a third less. If you remember the slide for single family homes, it was around 900 and change. So about a third less, which is proportionate since you don't get to have the land going along with it. But yeah, I think most of us would have expected this year to be down compared to last year, given the activity we had last year. Any questions? Anybody? All right. So we're going to get into the condo market, and then I'll talk a little bit about luxury, my predictions of what's going to happen, and we will get you all on your way. It's not raining too bad. So again, thank you guys for coming out. I'm very excited to have this many people. Thought it was just going to be me, myself, and I. So this turned out really, really well. My wife was going to have a heart attack back there. Okay, so we put a lot of work into this. So the condo market, there's several condo markets, but what we focus on and we paid attention mostly is the main Bayshore corridor, the main buildings. So these numbers only represent the picture of the condos you see here. We put Grove Isle in just because it has a lot of condos in the market. There are certainly a lot of smaller buildings on Bird Road, 27th Avenue, mixed into Center Grove that we did not put in here just because it's a different kind of market. So these are all the major buildings you'll see on Bayshore Drive. So here is our current inventory. So in those like 9 or 10 buildings that I talked about, we got the 46. This price here is really astronomical compared to where we were just a couple years ago. And the average list price is not that far from the single family homes. So this is our current state of inventory. And then we go to what has happened so far this year. So 111 sales. Our average sale price is pretty much equal to the single family, which I had not really thought that would be the case until we ran the numbers. And we are still seeing condos selling pretty close to asking price, although I do expect that to go down for all the reasons we talked about earlier. But when we get into the condos is each building kind of has its own unique profile. So we'll go through each building in a second. But again, same spike as single family, and maybe even disproportionate really when you look at where we were to how far we spiked here. So, you know, our condo market, especially Yacht Harbor, Grove Towers, all those, you know, those markets historically were filled with people who were either part-time residents in Miami or people who were downsizing, right? And then what happened here is all of a sudden people coming from New York, Chicago, all these major cities, they were very comfortable raising their families and living in condos. And they also couldn't get a house, so they jumped into the condo market. So there's a whole new sort of profile of who the condo buyer is in Coconut Grove right now. So many of the people that we met that were looking for houses ended up buying condos, and mostly because that's what they were comfortable with. That's where they were used to. And they chose the amenities over the land and the maintenance, especially people coming from New York. We also saw Park Grove get delivered and a lot of units in Park Grove go into here. So again, supply and demand is why we're probably not going to get anywhere near that number this year. And again, this shows us the progression here, same progressions. So big jump in the last 2 years, very similar to single family. So the two markets have run the same. The townhouse market has always been the sort of slightly less than the condo market and house market. Yeah. That number includes everything but pre-construction. So not pre-construction. Yeah, no. Like Mr. C's is not included here. It's only stuff that's actually closed. So, but pre-construction is a good question. We do still have a couple pre-constructions out there. Mr. C's, the tower across from Fresh Market, you guys have all seen. They are probably, I think they're 90% sold out, 4 or 5 units left. Their current asking price for those units runs from $1,600 to $1,700 a foot. So new construction is asking, you know, significantly higher, and they're getting pretty close to their asking prices. So that's something. We don't have a lot of new construction right now. We also have Aria, which is coming on over Grove Isle, which I believe is over 2,000 a foot already. Vita, sorry, it used to be Aria. Vita, yes, sorry. Thank you. So here we go. So this is where you can sort of see which buildings benefited the most from COVID and activities. And so, you know, you see like Ritz-Carlton had a huge spike in COVID. A lot of these units, people either wanted new or newer construction, or they wanted the buildings that had larger 3 bedrooms. What's that? Oh, sorry, I'm on the wrong chart. So this chart, this chart shows us just the amount of units for sale. So again, this year we see everybody sort of bought everything. Our supply and demand went way down. But Park Grove, it's not surprising, was, you know, this had just been delivered, so people were starting to resell there. That's why they had the most inventory, and then second most inventory here. But then the Ritz-Carlton was probably the most surprising. We really didn't have that many sales there for a long time. So here's where you see the units that actually sold per building. And again, you're looking at, you know, Grove Isle had a huge spike, and mostly because I think Grove Isle didn't run up in price as fast as everybody else, so it was a little bit more affordable, the units. It trailed behind, but now it's catching up real fast. But I mean, they, more than doubled some from a couple years ago. And then obviously Park Grove is going to remain high as a new inventory. Again, the Ritz-Carlton became more popular than ever because they had a lot of big 3-bedroom units in there. So again, those people who are going to live there with their kids, all the amenities that go with the Ritz-Carlton. And then some of the ones that didn't have as many transactions would be, the Sonesta, as we all know that hotel there, the Aria, because that's not really a residential unit, right? That's a part-time ownership, or you have you have your Airbnb business there. So some of those didn't participate in the same spike as the ones that became more full-time residences. Yes, sir.
You mentioned 3,000 homes, single-family
Yep.
homes, 1,500 townhomes. How many condos?
I don't know. I should know that. There's about 15,000 residences. So I guess we could back out that and say probably 10,000-ish, probably give or take. But there's about 15,000 and change total residences in the Grove. So, but again, that's a lot of that is some of that small stuff that we're not talking about here. Anybody thoughts on condos, questions? Yes, sir.
Do you know the percentage of condo buyers, which ones were investors or users?
The question was, do we know these new wave of buyers? I don't know the percentage of investors versus end users. My experience is that most of them have been end users. In previous past, there was a lot more investors. And it depends on the building, right? Most of these are all investors in the Mutiny and in here where you can do Airbnb. A lot of the other ones don't have the short-term rental, so you have to go for at least a year. So I would say, in my experience anyway, the majority of the condo owners in the last 2 years have been end users. Yes, sir.
Do you know anything about the development of other condos on Oak?
I know. I'm glad I didn't buy there. So those of you who the question was about the Arbor, which was a new construction that I think started more than 5 years ago. I'm not even. I heard that the building was going to be foreclosed on litigation. I just had a conversation with an owner the other day. They're optimistic that it's been straightened out and that they'll be delivering them in the next 6 months, which means 2 years probably, based on them. So yeah, I would say that was probably the one failed project we've had in the Grove since I've been a realtor. Just all kinds of problems, finance backing and things like that. So, but there is a light at the end of the tunnel from what I've heard from a few people now. Anybody else? Condos? Yes, sir.
Maybe it's the same lot.
Yeah.
But in the West Grove where all those vacant lots are.
Yep.
What are they doing with? What's the plan with those lots? And has anyone purchased them? Or?
Most of them have definitely been purchased over the years. Yeah. So you have this. Most of the ones that are vacant, I think, we're probably on this side of Grand. If you're talking about more back here, is that what you're talking about?
On
Charles.
yes.
Yeah. So right behind us, the difference between that part of West Grove and where the townhouses are is those are all single-family plots. Most of them have been bought and resold over time. More and more developers are building single-family homes there. There is a movement to save some of the old shotgun-style homes, but most of them are not going to be. None of them will be duplexes. They'll all be single-family eventually. But there's several developers that bought a bunch and are trying to weigh their options right now.
And that you're talking about the vacant lots.
Yes.
As well, right?
The ones you see on Charles and Williams and Franklin. Franklin doesn't have any, but Charles especially, yeah. Anybody else? Questions? Thank you guys. You're a very patient audience. That's a lot of numbers to take in. So hopefully you will take your home your packet and digest it later. All right, so here we can see, this is a question everybody asked me, sort of, how does my building compare to another building? These are all buildings that you're familiar with, most of them on Bayshore Drive. Of course, the newer buildings are going to be selling at a higher price per square foot than some of the older buildings. And Grove of Grand Bay had a couple significant penthouse sales that kind of skewed those numbers. But those two are probably going to lead the way for a few years until we have new construction more coming online. It's not surprising that Grosvenor House is probably number 3. I think it's been my opinion, the best well-built building, even though now they're doing a little renovations. Hugo did that one. Yacht Harbor, everyone would say that's a big outlier for Yacht Harbor. But this year they had a couple units that were forward-facing on the ocean, the B line and C line, which don't come on the market very often, which were renovated, sold at a disproportionate number. So that's what spiked this one. I think I would expect them to be back here again next year. And the rest of the older buildings are all in that 600 to 800 price per square foot. Questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I have a question about Tiger Tail Bay.
Yes.
I was wondering, I live there, and I was wondering, do you have any perspective? I know we just got another vote on an assessment.
Right.
And I've heard there's some people that want to buy the building. And
Yeah.
Any insights?
I mean, I've heard rumors a lot like you. So the question was, what's happening with Tiger Tail Bay, which is directly across the street on 27th and Tiger Tail from the Ritz-Carlton. There are a lot of rumors that some developers are quietly buying up units, trying to get a majority. I know they did have an assessment, but I don't know I know developers are trying to buy it. I just don't know at what stage they are yet. They have to get 86% of the building to force a sale. So
6%.
I believe so, yes. Yes, sir.
What is the terrace or balcony square footage? How does that come into play on these prices? Some
So-
very small balconies and others have huge balconies.
Yeah, I mean, so they're not reflective of, these are only interior numbers. So that's also why you'll see a Yacht Harbor is a little bit higher, because they have huge terraces, the older buildings do. Yacht Harbor, Grove Tower, but those numbers it's harder to calculate those. So I would say yes, some of the older buildings, that's what's propping them up, is that you do have large terraces compared to the new ones where a guy like me can't even stand on the balcony, right? So, all right, so I think Coconut Grove, it's safe to say, has become a luxury real estate market. Obviously, you guys have all seen the trends, where we're listed, where we're going, what's happening. But what does that really look like? So we've never done this slide before, but obviously the last 2 years, I think, warranted us looking at the Grove from a different lens. So here we are now looking at the history of, these are condos in red, and in blue, these are 5 million plus sales in Coconut Grove. So obviously, pre-COVID, that was kind of an anomaly, right? A given any year, we're probably selling 180 homes, and we're only, having 3 or 4 or 5. All of a sudden, COVID comes, everybody's here. This number just went crazy. And the condos, the same way. So I think, it's just such a dramatic change from 10 years ago, when that was just unheard of. Like a $5 million was on the water, brand new, beautiful, in a gated community. And now those homes are all asking 20, 30, 40 million. It's certainly a humongous change in the last 10 years. Questions on what's happening in luxury? Anybody? No? Okay. Whoa, one too many. So here's what the prices are for square foot in that market, just so you guys can have an idea of where they've progressed along. So obviously we're here now on the condos. We've actually overtaken the houses on the price per square foot. Again, there's a few mega penthouses that have sort of pushed that number up significantly. You guys all numbered out yet? There's a lot of numbers. All right. So we'll get into sort of questions I always get is, are we headed for a bubble, a housing crisis, a crash, a dip, all of these things? So, if you look at historical numbers, and I just came back from a couple of real estate conferences, listened to a bunch of economists talk, a bunch of realtor, my contemporaries around the world, and I sort of think we can look at some charts that will show us why we are definitely not headed to a housing crisis, probably a slight price adjustment. But this number here will show you that, when we had the housing crisis back in 06, 7, 8, the inventory, on the market was incredibly higher than where we are today, right? So that number right there tells us we have a supply and demand situation that's not going to allow us to see a crash, quote unquote. That's just one of the few reasons. This one here is probably the biggest reason why. So Ed, back in these days, he just closed his eyes and said, sign here and you got a mortgage, right? And that was happening for quite some time. So this chart shows you the quality, basically, of the mortgage application process. Obviously, as soon as the crash happened, lenders had a massive overreaction or correction on who they would lend to, what the requirements were, all of that. And that was pretty steady all the way bumping along, and still steady today. So the average person who's buying a home today, if they're putting debt on it, they're probably putting 20%. It's not 100% down with cash back at closing, right? Those days are not happening. So we don't have a liquidity problem, which contributed to the crash back then, where people were buying homes and then the market rate changed and they were 100%, there was no equity. So it was easy to walk away. The average homeowner now certainly has probably way more than 20% equity. And given what happened in the last 2 years, probably maybe 30 or 40% equity. So no one's just going to say, here's the keys to the castle and walk away from their homes. And then this is the last piece we were talking about. Obviously, the crash was really driven by all of the short sales and foreclosures that we saw. Those are, a thing of the past. These numbers, really, this is showing Miami, so it's not really the number in the country. I'm sorry, it's not anywhere near what we saw before, and I don't think will be a trigger. I don't even know of any foreclosures in Coconut Grove. There's probably a few pre-foreclosures here and there we see once in a while, but that's really not a market that we have or do I expect us to see going forward. Anybody have any thoughts on questions on these charts? No? You got it, Rob? All right. All right, so here we go. Factors contributing to why we're starting to see a slowdown. Again, the slowdown has not been representative of a price change yet, but I do predict the prices will start to tick down to a certain degree. Probably my guess, a 10% correction, but that's just a guess. The prices now are obviously significantly higher than they were even a year ago, so the buyer, I think, is getting tired of pushing up higher and higher, so buyers are sort of hanging back. We have the hangover from in 2021, where all the product was taken off the market, so we don't have as much product to sell. If we had more product in inventory, we would certainly be seeing more sales. And then all the nicer homes sold then. Obviously, mortgage rates are not helping us. And then lastly, something we have to consider in South Florida is our dollar and how strong it is. We were built on South American migration here, and right now our dollar is so strong to a lot of those places that we're not seeing them coming into the marketplace right now. Colombia certainly is a place, right, like we probably will be seeing more of if their dollar to the peso hadn't changed so dramatically. So that's going to affect us also with Europe for a little while. So I think all of those will contribute to the number of sales being down and probably a slight price correction, but I don't see a significant change. Anybody questions? I think there we are. We have reached the end. Congratulations for hanging in there with me, guys. So a little last round of Q&A if anybody has anything. Otherwise, yes, Maite.
What do you think about Vita?
Vita. So everybody know what Vita is. Vita is the new construction project that'll be built on the corner of Grove Isle, facing north. It's going to be a low-level building, a much more luxury product than what is on Grove Isle currently. They've had some really good sales. I think the market has shifted and they've kind of slowed down. They've been trying to build that thing for 5 years. We'll see if they build it. A lot of the people on Grove Isle don't want it. Some do. It's been a lot of point of contention. The product looks beautiful. I think there's probably some people who want to be in a luxury building but don't want to be in a high-rise. And I think that's what the attraction is. They're only a couple stories high, and every unit is unique, and every unit has an amazing view. So I think they'll figure it out and sell out, and I hope they build it. So, anybody else? Yes, sir.
My understanding is that the corridor along Grand Avenue is potentially
You want to talk about that?
on the cusp of getting developed.
Yep.
Do you know anything about that and how that
I don't really know enough to talk about. I just heard rumors. I'm hoping in my lifetime it gets developed. That would be amazing for all of us. I think it will. I think there's a lot of momentum. I've heard a lot of good things, but I couldn't say when or how or what's happening right now. Yes.
You've been talking about all about sales and once the sales and purchase market. How about rental rates? Do you have a sense of rental rates, let's say in townhouses, Center Grove?
I don't have the number off the top of my head on what the rate is. I wish I could remember. I did look it up just the other day. I know they're high, and I think they're probably going higher, actually, because with the interest rates, buying power, people who were looking at $2 million house at today's rates probably are only buying 1.5, and they're not liking what they're seeing. So I expect them to continue to go higher. I want to say they're $4 or $5 a foot, but I'm just guessing on that number right now. So, well, if you don't have any more questions, I want to thank you guys again. A big thank you for Greenstreet, my wife Kelly for helping me put this on. Most of my team is here. If you have any questions, we'll be in the bar. Thank you guys. Be safe and be dry. Thank you. We'll see you in January, February.